Hey, I'm Guy.
I'm John.
It's our YouTube channel. Subscribe to this channel. Give this video a like.
Check out the podcast below in the description.
Plenty more discussed there. All right, John, big picture. Here's where things stand for the 49ers. After losing to the Packers on Thursday Night Football, they are now 4-5.
Not good.
That's last place in the NFC West. That means all those teams have playoff position above them. We know that the NFC East is going to get a team into the playoffs. We know the Packers are 6-5. We know the Bucks are 6-2. Those are divisional winners. You'd have to say at this point, your other three wildcard teams are going to come from the group of Saints, Cardinals, Rams, Bears. Those are your 4-5 win teams at this point, battling for four.
I'd short the Bears and take the other three.
We'll get to the Bears, my lock of the week later. You've also got a late push coming from your Detroit Lions. No. So what do we make big picture now where the 49ers sit at 4-5 with the Saints coming up next?
Yeah, I think Jim Moore's dad said it best. Like, the playoff talk's dead. They play the Saints, the Rams on the road the next 2 weeks, and then the Bills. Like, they're just not winning one of those games. Like, if Nick Mullins is the quarterback of those 3 games, they're not winning any one of those 3 games. At Saints, at Rams. What's the line next against the Saints with Nick Mullins? 10 points?
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders are back practicing, but Alvin Kamara may not be. I mean, if you had took all 3 of those guys away, it's a single-digit line, without a crowd. I'm going to say like 9.5.
At the Rams if they're healthy against Mullins.
6.5, 7.
I'll fucking hammer the Rams. I mean, Nick Mullins against those guys.
I know. The Rams have been bad. You've beaten them once.
But guy, we saw the quarterback tonight. He's terrible.
I understand. I watched them. I'm just saying I just can't see them being repeatedly double-digit dogs, especially to the Rams. But maybe 8.5.
But I mean, do you think the score is close, like in these games with Nick Mullins against these teams?
I wouldn't be shocked if one of these games is close. Yeah, that's just been Kyle's MO. Kyle just finds ways. Not that I'm not saying they're going to win any of these games, but.
Yeah, I mean, it'll help. Obviously, they're missing Ayuk and Debo, and those guys help a tremendous amount. But I watch Nick Mullins. I just have no faith of him playing the quarterback position, even if you do have a lot better talent. Because we saw against the Eagles when they did have a lot more talent around him with Kittle, with Ayuk. It's just very difficult. And at the end of the day,
there's some balls that he just throws to not your guy.
Yeah, we just talk about this nonstop. It's a coaching and quarterback league. I have a bunch of faith in the head coach. I have on a 1 to 10 scale after watching this game, and just now we've seen 2 starts from this player. I would put Nick Mullins going up against a good team. Like, you play the Washington football team, like, okay, you play the Rams or the Saints. Scale that he's just going to be serviceable enough for you to win. Like, right, just play like a game where just keep you in it 1 to 10. I'd be at like a 2, and that's high end, guy. That to me, it's just that simple. Like, we know the blueprint for the sport is the quarterback, which is crazy because we were like crushing Jimmy. And I think it shows you how quickly. And listen, Hurt Jimmy is terrible too. Like, he's not a very good. Hurt Jimmy is not a good player.
Hurt Jimmy's better than that. This is why I said this week I'd take Hurt Jimmy over Mullins. Not hurt limping Jimmy, but like what we had starting the Seattle game without even, I wouldn't blink. I would take that guy.
I would tend to agree. It's hard because I get Jimmy all convoluted in my head.
I know. But every time you watch Mullins, Jimmy starts feeling better.
It does really put in the light just how much better Jimmy. There's a reason Jimmy Garoppolo, even if he's not a top 10 quarterback, still a top 20 quarterback. A top 20 quarterback is better than a backup who probably is a fringe backup. So that means what is Mullins? Agreed. Somewhere between 50 and 70. Like, there's that gap right between, everyone's shitting on the Jimmies and the Cars and those type guys between like 15 and 25. The guy at 55 can't hold his jock, right? Can't even Chase Daniels, those type players.
Look what's happened at the Cowboys, right? They've gone from, Dak. Is Dak good enough? And then you get to Dalton, you're like, oh, I wish we had Dak. And then you get to DiNucci, and you're like, Cooper Rush?
Yeah, it snowballs fast.
Yeah.
Sometimes I wonder, and it doesn't matter, like, is Mullins a lock to keep starting? Like, does CJ get the next start? They're at that point now, I think, right?
Unfortunately, there's like enough games left where if you went to CJ, then who you just go back to Mullins? You might. I mean, I can't
Well, yeah,
imagine Mullins.
none of that matters, right? Like, who cares? Like, does he lose in the locker room?
No.
Right?
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, there's enough games left here where if you're going to go to CJ, you're going to need to go to another guy, and that's just going to be Mullins again.
Well,
I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying
looking back last year when Breeze went down, and I thought this. I'm like, oh, the Saints are screwed. And you know what turns out? Is Teddy a top 15 quarterback? No, but he's somewhere between 25 and 15. It's like he comes in,
he's
start
a
winning,
starter.
And you watch him this year, like, oh, Teddy's not terrible. And the gap between Teddy Bridgewater and Nick Mullins, they have nothing in common, like nothing, right? I mean, they're just, and once upon a time I thought Nick was decent, but you can never judge a quarterback. Here's the other thing I've learned is in lost seasons when you're like 1-10 and a guy just has a good start, it doesn't mean anything, right? It really doesn't. And I think sometimes, and maybe I had a higher thought of Nick Mullins than based on like that previous work in garbage time, the ACL season. It doesn't matter. Like tonight mattered, right? It mattered for the Packers to try to win this game. You were playing a real football game, not necessarily like you were missing guys because of Corona, so it's not totally real, but just in terms of the importance to the other team. They were going to attack. They had just lost. They're technically the 1 seed right now. They were going to approach it like a playoff. They were going to come, and you were going to get their full swing. And Nick Mullins got smothered. And it's not all his fault. He's missed some players or whatever, but it's just like you don't even belong on the field.
I think
even though he ends up throwing for 300, but it's the most garbage time yards ever.
Well, like to your point, an example would be if you go back at, I guess it was 2018. If we go back and look at all the starts, he lost most of them. But then you'll see like, oh, look at the Seattle game. He protected the football, threw for the mid 200s. Maybe it was 270, 1 touchdown, no picks. Like if you could just do that. But quarterback play, a lot like life, is about can you show up every day and do it? Can you do it game after game after game? It's easy to be a good partner. It's easy to be a good friend. It's easy to be for a day. It's easy to be reliable as a friend for a day. Someone says, can you pick me up today? I'm like, yeah, I got you. What about when they call you tomorrow? What about when they call you the next day? What about when they call you the next day?
Eventually, okay, can you get a car?
Get a car. Right. But it's easy to be consistent.
You hit something, you need a ride?
If you're only being asked to be consistent every once in a while, well, it's easy because that's not actually being consistent. So when you look at a guy with 8 starts and he wins 2 and you go, oh, look at the way he played in those 2 wins. It's like, well, yeah, but the other 6, that's how shit usually works. It's hard. It's hard to be consistent. That is the job, is doing it every single day. That's part of the job, is the repetitiveness of the job. Like if you F-16 fighter pilots only had to fly once every 3 months, it'd probably be easy. But what about when they got to fly on no sleep repeatedly over and over and over? What's the thing the SEALs always say is like, you don't know when you're going to go, but you always have to be ready to go. So you're just constantly doing, I can't even imagine the stuff they do, right? Waking up at 3 a.m. and carrying packs 9 miles through the forest. But part of what they're training is just the focus to be able to repeat in adverse situations these performances. And quarterback play is,
well, if I told you this, they had Trent Williams, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel tonight, I'd be like, they have a dramatically better and Mostert. Maybe Mostert changes it because they could just run it nonstop. It changes it. But one thing we've seen is eventually, and we always see this, the NFC Championship game is such just an outlier football game, an important game, playoff or non-playoff, where you can win a game and throw 8 attempts. Even, I'd say an outlier football game was last week Kirk Cousins. I remember you telling me, if you check the box score, he was like 11-14. I'd say any number in the NFL under like 20 attempts. Is that fair? Like 20 attempts, especially in 2020, is a pretty big outlier game.
What was Tua's final number?
He was like 12-22 or something.
Yeah.
Like you're just eventually going to throw, because you're just getting so many second and longs. Like you just start passing 2 downs, right? It just adds up. When you have passing attempts in the low teens, like that's not normal, let alone Jenny's NFC Championship game is an all-time outlier. I bet statistically for the next 40 years of our life, it'll be a statistical outlier. So eventually, even when you have talent around you, you're going to have to attempt passes. And one thing you see, and I think Jimmy falls into this category, the more you attempt, the more likely something weird can happen. Well, Mullins, who's way worse, And I got the feel like you watch this game tonight and you start looking at the schedule, you go, you just easy to fall behind. You can't fall behind with Nick Mullins. You have no shot. And that Eagles game, like, boom, what happened? The moment they fell behind, next play a pick. Because when you fall behind, you're kind of on the defensive in football. Unless you're good, right? Rodgers doesn't freak. Even though technically I heard Colin say a stat, they've never come back with Aaron Rodgers like trailing in the fourth quarter. Some weird stat. Now that doesn't even sound, it sounds unbelievable saying it out loud, but it was a stat like, oh my God. But like with Brady, in a game, you get down a touchdown, you get down 2 touchdowns, you're never worried with the top. Even with Jimmy and when the team was good, you're like, they can come back. They proved it last year. Nick Mullins, it's not possible. And that's the problem. Like looking at the schedule the next 3 weeks, you go, they probably, realistically in all 3 games, probably 2 of the 3 of them, they're going to get behind a touchdown plus, and it's just going to be very, very difficult.
And their defense isn't really taking the ball away.
Well, their defense is clearly not as good. And their weapons, even if Ayuk and Debo come back, like missing Kittle, missing Mostert, it's not.
To answer I think what you were going to say.
Are they 6-10 team?
Well, yeah, they'll be. If they look good in a couple of their next 3 games, then they might be favored in 2 games at this point, right? The Washington game and
they got 4 wins.
Cowboy game.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say.
Kyle does just tend to sneakily do something, and who knows at the end of the year. I guess they play Arizona and Seattle. Those teams probably will be. Arizona certainly will need to win late. Seattle probably will need to win late. Week 17, they may not need to, but
I would say every game beside Week 17. That Seattle game, who knows, right? They might have the division. That Cardinal game, though, when you're just in the wild card, you're fighting for an extra position. They're going to need to win that game, right? Because they're going to be a 9 and 8 win team.
Absolutely.
The Bills, Rams, Saints, all 3 of those are must-win games. And Washington Cowboys, who even cares? But, like, who knows? Like, Mullins, I just – when you roll out Mullins, even as these guys come back, Debo, Kendrick Bourne, you can never feel good about it going into a game, whether you're playing the Washington football team or whether you're playing Breeze and Peyton or McVay, right? That's what I think really came to light tonight. Even the scores actually makes the game look way closer than it was. I think everyone listening that watched it knows it wasn't. When you really watch the game, like, okay, this is an NFL game in the first half, we don't really have a chance. And that's what you just start looking at the schedule. You're like, God, it's going to be tough. Even Kyle, who's really good. I think you're seeing it with Belichick, right? We saw it once the Niners, who were healthy at the time, played Belichick. You're like, he can have great game plans. I don't think he has enough bullets in the gun to like hang with most teams.
There's only so many personnel hits you can take and still give yourself a shot, right?
Yeah, and it just turns out, and we talked about this when the schedule came out, this was the stretch, right? Rams to basically the Rams. Because we thought the Patriots were going to be good. But even if let's just kick those 2 out because they won those. This stretch, Seattle, Packers, Saints, Rams, and the Bills, because they were a playoff team, we're like, that stretch is going to be tough.
Right. And then they look good early, too. And we just know they have a high end. Like, you can fall behind big to them, and then it's curtains. It's clear. Like,
going 6-10, it wouldn't be the worst thing if you think about it. If you're going to go 6-10 or 8-8 just because the draft pick, dramatically different.
And you're not making the playoffs at 8-8 this year, we don't think. Even with the extra playoff spot in the NFC.
I think because your division's so good with the Rams and the Cardinals, I don't even think it's an option, do you? If you just factor in, like, the Saints are good enough to get to 9, and the Rams and Cardinals are just going to win more games than you because they're healthier.
Yep.
You're screwed.
Yep. Yeah. But
I do think the shittier they are, and we'll just talk about this more and more, the more Jimmy's status becomes less a lock and more just up in the air. Maybe he is around, right? It does save him.
You're saying if the quarterback's the other?
I'm just saying, let's say they go 6-10 and Mullins and CJ are just god awful. That's a good thing for Jimmy.
Why?
Because that changes the conversation in a personnel department and with the coach. Like, you kind of realize how much better this guy, how easy it is to just end up with Mullins and CJ.
I know. Well,
the equivalent of like Ryan Fitzpatrick and your second round Mac Jones, and then both those guys suck.
It also makes it easier to draft a guy, though, if you're 6-10. But yeah, it's why I always defer to.
But if you draft a guy, Jimmy's probably on the team too.
I just always defer to quarterback in limbo, probably return. It's just hard to replace quarterbacks when you have a guy that you know is above. Jimmy's above average. When you have a guy that you know is above average, right? Not average like 15 or better. I just mean like what you usually find. So you're probably right about that. But
you know what Jimmy Garoppolo's stats are this year?
You're chuckling, so it makes me think they're really good.
Well, I was laughing just because I was thinking to the top of my head. I'm like, well, I've played him a bunch of fantasy. He's never thrown me a touchdown. The last couple games, he's no touchdowns, 3 picks.
We had two really good games, right?
Yeah, he had 7 touchdowns, 5 picks. So
wait, that's his overall numbers are 7 touchdowns, 5 picks?
I was expecting it to be like 4 touchdowns, 9 picks. That's why I started laughing, because I've played the twice I've played him in fantasy, it was like negative points. So I just assumed all of his games, but he did throw 3 touchdowns against the Rams. You know, I guess.
I remember that game.
Yeah.
I remember that game well enough not to be fooled by the box score. All right. Whatever comes will come. We will battle, because that's the only choice you have.
Yeah.